On Valentine's Day, my parents said my wife trapped me with a child. Is that how they see us? She asked. I didn't snap, I poured wine. Weeks later, they were removed from my life. I can still see the flicker of the candles that night, their light dancing on Claire's trembling hands. The wine tasted sharp, metallic, almost as if it had absorbed the tension in the air. My parents' words weren't shouted, they were delivered like a verdict. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up with the echo of my mother's voice in the room. It's not the words themselves that haunt me, but the calm certainty behind them. My parents arrived right on time, coats still dusted from the light snow outside. Evelyn kissed me on the cheek, and Richard gave me his usual half-smile. They brought dessert, creme brulee from the bakery they loved, and for the first 30 minutes it almost felt like we turned a corner. We talked about the weather, about my dad's golf buddies, and about the baby sleeping upstairs. I poured everyone wine and sat down, thinking maybe, just maybe, we'd get through a night without barbs. Then Evelyn set down her fork. She didn't look at me. She looked straight at Claire. So, she said, her voice measured. You must be pleased with yourself. Claire frowned. Sorry. Richard leaned back, swirling his wine like he was cross-examining a witness. You've got Daniel right where you want him. That baby of yours. Well, clever way to make sure he stays. The words landed heavier than if they'd been shouted. Claire's hand froze halfway to her mouth. She set down her fork, eyes searching mine. Is that how they see us? She asked quietly. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I wanted to tell them to leave, to shout, to throw the wine in their faces. Instead, I picked up the bottle, topped off my glass, and said nothing. Dinner went on, but every bite tasted like ash. Claire barely spoke. My parents carried on as if nothing had happened, chatting about a neighbor's divorce, about a property my dad was thinking of buying. I knew I should have defended her, but there's a point where the anger is so sharp you can't touch it without cutting yourself. I kept my voice level, my expression polite. That was the game they'd taught me growing up. Composure at all costs. It wasn't new. Their disapproval had been there since the beginning. When I'd first brought Claire home, Evelyn had asked, in front of her, if she was in it for the long haul or just enjoying the view. At our wedding, Richard had made a toast about learning to live with your choices. Little digs, always disguised as jokes or advice, piling up over the years until they formed something solid between us. I tried to bridge it, invited them over for Sunday dinners, shared photos of the baby, pretended not to notice when Evelyn corrected Claire's parenting in front of her. Every attempt ended the same way. A smile, a nod, and another cut just deep enough to sting. That night, after they left, Claire and I cleaned up in silence. I could see in her face that this one had gone deeper than the rest. She didn't cry, didn't yell, just washed the plates, dried her hands, and went upstairs to check on the baby. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the candle stubs and the untouched creme brulee. The room smelled of rosemary and wine and something else. Something sour I couldn't name. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Mark, an old friend from college who'd gone into private investigation work. I'd hired him once before, years back, when I needed to clear up a business dispute. He still checked in from time to time. Happy Valentine's, he'd written. Still surviving the in-laws? I almost laughed, but instead I typed back barely. I didn't know it then, but that casual mention, that old connection, would end up being the only way I'd learn the truth. Upstairs, the baby cried, and Claire's soft voice answered. I stayed downstairs a little longer, listening to the faint hum of the heater, the clink of a bottle warming in the kitchen sink. My parents' words kept looping in my head, quiet but final. You've got Daniel right where you want him. By the time I went up, Claire was in the rocking chair, our son asleep in her arms. She looked up at me, her face pale in the dim light. If they think that's who I am, she whispered, then I don't know how we come back from this. I didn't answer, not because I didn't have one, but because I already knew. The Sunday after Valentine's Day, the house was quiet in that heavy way it gets when neither of you wants to speak first. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the yard and muting the outside world. The coffee pot gurgled in the kitchen. Claire sat across from me at the table, hair pulled back, sweatshirt hanging loose, both hands wrapped around her mug like she was holding on to something solid. We didn't talk about the baby monitor glowing between us, or the sound of our son shifting upstairs. We didn't talk about my parents. But the silence had weight, and I knew it wasn't going anywhere on its own. "I'm done," I said finally. Claire's eyes lifted from the steam. "Done? With them? All of it?" I leaned back, my hands flat on the table. "I'm not going to keep inviting them into our lives just so they can tear you down. Or me. Or him." Her mouth pressed into a line. She didn't nod, didn't thank me, but I saw the way her shoulders dropped, the way she exhaled like she'd been holding that breath for months. I didn't wait to talk myself out of it. I picked up my phone, scrolled to my parents' contact names, and blocked them both. Messages, calls, emails, gone. I deleted them from social media, the photos we'd shared, the group threads with extended family. The clean sweep felt strange, like walking into a room and flipping the lights off for good. That afternoon, a package came, a little too soon to be anything but planned in advance. A gift bag with a pale blue ribbon, for the baby written on the card. I didn't open it, just taped it back up and sent it straight to return to sender. The thing is, I'd been here before. Not this exact moment, but close enough. When Claire and I got engaged, I'd spent months trying to smooth things over with them. Lunches where Evelyn would accidentally mention an ex she liked better. Phone calls with my father that turned into lectures about financial independence and prenups. Every bridge I built, they tore down. And I rebuilt it anyway, because that's what you do when it's your parents. Not this time. For the first 2 days after cutting them off, there was nothing but quiet. I thought maybe it was done. Maybe they'd take the hint, stew in private, and eventually give up. Then the screenshots started coming. A mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in weeks, messaged me late one night. "You need to see this." Attached were 2 images. Both were group chats I wasn't part of. Evelyn's name lit up in blue. The first was a subtle dig. "It's so sad watching him throw his life away, but I guess she's got him under her thumb now." The second was worse. "He'll find out the baby isn't his eventually. Better sooner than later." I stared at the words until my eyes blurred. Claire was asleep upstairs. I didn't wake her. I told myself they were just trying to get under my skin, that it was all noise. But the next day, another message came from someone else. This time, the thread was about me. "Daniel's not as perfect as he seems. We could talk for hours about what we've found." I set my phone down slowly, like it might go off in my hands. If they could dig up gossip this quickly, what else were they capable of finding? I didn't know it yet, but that was the first tremor before the ground really started to shift. Early evening bled into night without changing color. I sat at my desk with the baby monitor glowing beside the keyboard, its little green bar jumping every time our son sighed in his sleep. My phone hummed at intervals, not loud, just enough to keep my shoulders tight. I told myself I'd stop checking after the next one. Then the next one came. The first message was from a college friend I hadn't spoken to in months. He sent a screenshot and a single line. "Saw this and thought you should know." The image showed a group chat I wasn't part of. My mother's name in the thread, her words neat and tidy. "He'll learn soon enough. Some men don't need to be fathers." Someone replied with a laughing emoji. My friend added, "I'm sorry, man." I stared at the ceiling until the pulse in my throat slowed. Then I scrolled further down. 2 more screenshots from 2 different numbers. In one, Evelyn wrote, "I wish I were wrong, but you can only ignore patterns for so long." In another, a cousin chimed in with, "Claire's always been calculating." The insinuation was a fog. Not solid enough to grab, thick enough to choke. I closed my eyes and pictured Claire upstairs, tucked on her side, facing the crib, one arm flung over the blanket. She'd taken the early shift. I'd take the late one. It wasn't a plan so much as a truce with exhaustion. I swiveled the baby monitor toward me until it was the only bright thing on the desk. Another vibration. A new sender. Unknown. The text was formal, clipped. It said a courier would arrive in the morning with a letter requiring a signature. It referenced my full name, my address, and a line about family matters that would benefit from mature resolution. The tone was familiar. It read like my father. I slept badly, shallow, and restless. By morning, the courier was on the doorstep with a manila envelope and a tablet for my signature. I opened the letter at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside my elbow. Richard's letter was 3 pages. It began with "as your father" and slid down into "as your counsel." even though he hadn't acted as my attorney since I got married. He wrote that he wanted to help me stabilize my situation. He feared I'd sacrificed long-term interests for short-term emotions. He listed options: mediation, a temporary separation, and filing for primary custody to ensure the child's welfare. The phrase that hooked me sat in the center of page 2. If you are open to seeing what I have, I can show you undeniable evidence that Claire is unfit. Undeniable evidence. The words were designed to sit in my stomach like gravel. I folded the letter once and slid it under a stack of mail. I didn't answer. I didn't call. I went back to work, back to tending the small normal things that still made sense. Cleaning bottles, throwing in laundry, wiping the counters. Every few minutes, my gaze drifted toward the stairs, listening for a cry. That night, after we'd put the baby down, I told Claire about the letter. I didn't read it to her. I summarized badly, too flat, too careful, and watched her face as the color drained. Undeniably, she said, barely audible. What could they possibly have? I had no answer. I reached for her hand. She pulled back like my fingers were hot. What did you say to him? Nothing. I ignored it. You ignored it? She repeated, like testing the weight of the words. They want a reaction, I said. I'm not giving them one. She nodded, but it wasn't agreement. It was a small motion of someone treading water. She went upstairs early. I stayed with the monitor and the letter, the house quiet except for the heater ticking and the fridge humming. When the baby stirred, I went up and stood in the doorway, listening to the soft rasp of his breath. There's a sound babies make when they're deeply asleep. It's almost a whistle. I focused on that until my shoulders unclenched. The texts didn't stop. More screenshots from more numbers, friends, and acquaintances, and a former coworker who wrote, I don't know what to believe, but you should see this. Noise layered on noise. Allegations shifted from Claire's motives to mine. I was naive, weak, blinded. Maybe I knew more than I let on. Someone wrote that the child didn't look like me, which was absurd and mean and somehow still lodged itself in the softest part of me. On the fourth night, while Claire washed bottles at the sink, I stood beside her, drying them and pressing my shoulder to hers. They're trying to rot us from the inside, I said. That's the play. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them and nodded. I know. We cleaned in silence, like we were moving through a choreography we hadn't chosen. After she went to bed, I didn't follow. I scrolled. I told myself I was cataloging the damage. I needed a record. Maybe I was just punishing myself. Every new message was a fresh bruise. A week passed. I pretended to be busy when anyone called. I pretended I couldn't hear the thin thread of fear in Claire's voice when she asked, "Anything new?" I started to rehearse answers that would make it all feel temporary. The package arrived on a Thursday. No note this time, just a small box with no return address and a USB drive inside, taped to an index card that said my name. I didn't open it in the kitchen. I didn't want Claire to be the one to see my face when I plugged it in. I took the box to my office, closed the door softly, and slid the drive into the side of my laptop. A single file blinked onto the screen. The name was a date from 2 weeks earlier and the name of a downtown hotel. I hovered the cursor over the file, then double-clicked. The video opened with a lobby camera view, timestamp running along the top, people passing in and out with bags and briefcases. 30 seconds in, the frame caught Claire. Hair in a low bun, black coat, eyes on her phone. She crossed the lobby briskly and pressed the elevator button. A man appeared at the edge of the frame, tall, in a dark jacket. He didn't touch her. They didn't speak. Not that I could see. But he stood just behind her as the doors opened. They stepped in together. The elevator doors closed. The video cuts to a different angle, a hallway camera. The same timestamp. The elevator opened to an empty hall. 30 seconds later, the man in the dark jacket walked past the camera and turned down the corridor. Claire followed 2 steps behind. At the end of the hall, he slid a keycard and pushed open a door. She glanced over her shoulder. A quick flick of her gaze and stepped inside. The door shut. I watched the seconds tick on the timestamp. 30 seconds. A minute. 2. 5. 10. The footage was cut again, spliced to morning. The same door opened around 7. The man stepped out, alone. He looked down the hall once, then walked toward the elevator. I replayed the first part 3 times, trying to squeeze more information from a fixed camera and the grain of cheap security footage. There was nothing else. No audio, no context, just a series of images arranged to say a particular thing. I sat back, palms sweating against the arms of the chair, and counted my breaths until the room came back into focus. There are moments when you can feel the floor tilt under you, when every object in the room seems slightly wrong. The angle of a chair, the shadow of a lamp, the weight of your own name. I felt it then, and I heard my father's voice, calm and reasonable, asking if I'd like to see the undeniable evidence. I ejected the drive and stared at it in my hand. A small piece of plastic, lighter than a house key, packed with the power to fracture a family. From the other side of the door, the baby monitor crackled softly. Claire's footsteps crossed the hallway toward the nursery. She hummed something under her breath, off-key, the exact way she always did when she was too tired to be self-conscious. I slipped the drive back into the box and slid it into the bottom drawer of the desk. Then I turned off the monitor feed on my laptop and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. The smear campaign had a spine now. It wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a narrative with pictures and timestamps and the kind of certainty that makes people stop asking questions. And whether it was truth or a trap, it was in my house. I turned off the office light and opened the door quietly, feeling for the railing with my palm as I headed upstairs to the sound of my son settling back to sleep. The kitchen was dark except for the pale square of light from the open fridge. Claire stood barefoot, one hand on the door, staring at the shelves like she'd forgotten why she'd opened it in the first place. The hum of the motor filled the silence. I set the small box on the counter between us. "We need to talk." She turned her head slowly, eyes adjusting to me in the shadows. "What is it?" I didn't answer. I just slid the USB drive across the counter. She didn't pick it up. "I've already watched it," I said. "Hotel lobby. Hallway. You, walking into a room with another man." Her fingers tightened around the fridge door. She didn't flinch, didn't try to deny it. "I can explain." The tone wasn't defensive, but it wasn't apologetic either. It was flat, measured. "I'm listening." She let the door swing shut, the kitchen dropping into half-darkness. It wasn't what it looked like. That man was a friend of Mark's. He needed help. His girlfriend had been hurting him, controlling him, threatening to ruin him if he left. Mark couldn't get there in time, and I was close by. My jaw tightened. "So you went to a hotel room with him? To help him pack his things and get out?" "That's it." She moved around the counter toward me. "I was there for less than an hour. I left before midnight, came home, and went straight to bed. You didn't even wake up." Her words were sharp in their certainty, but the image from the footage kept looping in my head, her glancing over her shoulder before stepping into the room. My father's voice threaded through it. "If you are open to seeing what I have—" "You didn't tell me," I said. "I didn't think I needed to. It wasn't my story to tell, and I didn't want to drag you into it." She hesitated. "Especially with your parents watching for anything they can twist." I pressed my palms to the counter. "That's the problem, Claire. They've already twisted it. And now I'm standing here trying to figure out which version is real." Her eyes glistened in the dim light. "So you think I cheated on you?" I didn't answer right away. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the low whir of the fridge. "I want to believe you," I said finally. "But they've been feeding me this poison for weeks, and now I can't tell if it's in my system." Her breath hitched, the sound small but sharp. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm not asking you to take my word over theirs. I'm asking you to remember who I am." That was the thing I did remember. I remembered the woman who stayed up all night with the baby when I was sick, the woman who saved every card I ever gave her in a shoebox under the bed. But the image from that hallway camera kept sliding between those memories like a wedge. We didn't raise our voices. We didn't slam doors. We just stopped looking at each other. She went upstairs to check on the baby. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the black square of the microwave clock until my vision blurred. The days that followed felt like living in a house where every surface had been dusted with glass shards. Careful movements, shallow breaths, the constant awareness that one wrong step could cut deep. At night, when the baby cried, I caught myself listening for her tone. Was it guilt? Was it fatigue? Was it just motherhood? One morning, I found myself staring at my phone, thumb hovering over a number I hadn't called in months. Mark. We'd been friends since high school. Back when the biggest trouble we got into was skipping class to sit on his roof and watch the freight trains go by. Now he worked as a private investigator, quiet, methodical, good at peeling back layers people didn't want touched. When he answered, his voice was warm at first. Daniel? It's been a while. Yeah. Listen, I need your help. There was a pause on the line. This is about Claire? I froze. What makes you say that? You don't call me unless it's serious. And you don't sound like yourself. I swallowed hard. It's serious. I've got a piece of footage that could ruin everything. And I need to know if it's the truth or a setup. Another pause, then a quiet exhale. Send me what you have. I'll dig. After we hung up, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, but the sense that I'd stopped treading water and started swimming, even if I didn't know which direction the shore was. That night, Claire asked me if I'd decided what to believe. I told her no, but that I'd asked Mark to look into it. Her expression flickered, hurt, then resignation. She just nodded and turned away. I lay awake long after she fell asleep, staring at the ceiling. In my head, two betrayals were circling each other. Hers, if she'd lied, and mine, for putting her under investigation in her own home. And somewhere between them, my father's voice was still laughing. Rain was coming down in steady sheets, blurring the view through my office window until the world outside was just shadows and movement. The sound had been my companion for most of the morning, filling the gaps where my thoughts kept stalling. When Mark finally arrived, he didn't bother with a hello, just shook the water off his coat and set a thick folder on my desk. This is everything, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. His voice was even, but his eyes searched mine, like he was weighing how much I could handle. I flipped the folder open. The first page was a timestamped log, clear as day. Claire entered the hotel room at 10:17 p.m., leaving at 11:04 p.m. No gaps, no hidden exits, just in and out. She was there for less than an hour, Mark said, leaning forward. And the man? He left alone the next morning. There's no footage of them together after she walked out. It was like the air in the room shifted. My chest felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. That's not all, he continued, pulling a smaller envelope from inside his coat. Your parents didn't just pass along that footage. They built a case out of thin air. I pulled out the contents. Printed screenshots of text messages between Claire and some unknown number. Except they weren't real. The metadata was stripped. The timestamps were wrong. Mark had traced them back to a burner phone purchased with a prepaid card. The buyer? My father, under an alias. Screenshots can be faked easily enough, I said, my voice low. Mark nodded. Which is why they didn't stop there. They paid two people to make statements against Claire. One of them a former coworker, the other? He hesitated, then looked me in the eye. A mutual acquaintance of yours. Someone who owed your parents money. I scanned the statement. It claimed Claire was seen kissing the man from the hotel in a bar a week before Valentine's Day. But Mark had pulled the security footage from that bar. It was empty except for staff that night. Every word I read made my pulse louder in my ears. They wanted you to see her as unfaithful, Daniel. Enough to push you toward custody filings, Mark said. Your father even framed it as helping you in that letter. I thought about that letter, the smug, formal language. Undeniable evidence. The phrase was in there twice, like he'd been daring me to take the bait. My stomach turned. How much did they pay for this? Too much, Mark said. Between the fake witnesses and whoever leaked that hotel footage, we're talking thousands. And that's not counting the quiet favors your dad cashed in to get it done. I sat back, running a hand over my face. They've been trying to tear her apart piece by piece. No, Mark said gently. They've been trying to tear you apart. Claire was just the easiest way in. I thought back to the Valentine's dinner. The look on my mother's face when she'd said the words. The way my father had sat back in his chair like a judge watching a trial he already knew the verdict to. They hadn't just wanted me away from Claire. They'd wanted me to doubt everything I had, down to the ground under my feet. I closed the folder and sat there for a long moment, listening to the rain against the glass. Then I stood. I'm going to confront them. Mark's brow furrowed. Be careful. People willing to fabricate this much. They don't think they're wrong. They think they're righteous. I gave him a tight nod. I know. That's why I'm not walking into it blind. As I walked him to the door, the folder felt heavier in my hand than any case file I'd ever carried. But it wasn't the paper or the weight of evidence. It was the understanding that every page was a knife my parents had tried to plant in my marriage. When the door closed behind Mark, I stood there a while, just listening to the rain. The truth was out, but the damage was done. All that was left now was to live without them and see what survived. The house was still except for the faint creak of the rocking chair in the next room. I could hear Claire humming softly, her voice weaving into the steady rhythm that calmed our son. I sat on the couch with the folder from Mark resting on my lap, the weight of it pressing against my knees like a final, unignorable truth. My phone was in my hand before I'd even decided what to say. I scrolled to Dad in my contacts, my thumb hovering over the call button for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then I pressed it. It rang twice before he picked up. "Daniel," Richard said, his tone neutral, almost cordial, like we were catching up after a long week instead of standing at the edge of something final. "I know," I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected, but it didn't shake. The doctored screenshots, the fake witnesses, paying people to lie about Claire. I know everything. There was silence on the other end, just the faint sound of him exhaling. Then, "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut in. "You wanted to destroy my marriage. You were willing to poison everything just to make me do what you thought was right." Richard's tone hardened. "It wasn't about destroying anything. It was about protecting you from a mistake before it ruined your life. Sometimes, Daniel, you have to take control before things spiral too far." "Control?" I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. That's what this was about. Not truth. Not family. Control. "That's not fair," he said, but I could hear the shift, the defensive edge creeping in. "We did what was necessary." I let the silence hang long enough for my own thoughts to settle. "No," I said finally. "You did what was unforgivable, and you still think you were right." From somewhere in the background, my mother's voice called, "Richard, what's going on?" She must have picked up on the tension because her voice came closer, sharper. "Daniel, if you'd just listen." I ended the call. For a long moment, I just stared at the phone screen, their names still lit up as if they were waiting for me to reconsider. I opened my contacts, scrolled to both entries, and deleted them without hesitation. No archived numbers. No safety net. Just gone. I set the phone on the coffee table and leaned back, letting the quiet of the room fill me. In the next room, Claire was still humming. Our son let out a soft sigh in his sleep, and it felt like the house exhaled with him. That was the last time I heard their voices. They tried a few emails, a letter at Christmas, but I never opened them. Claire shredded the envelopes before I could change my mind. 2 years later, the folder is still in my desk drawer. I haven't opened it since. The marriage isn't perfect. We've had fights, hard days, nights where the past threatened to creep back in, but it's ours. And it's peaceful. People sometimes ask if I regret cutting my parents out. I don't. You can patch over a crack in a wall, but you can't build a home on a foundation you know is rotten. They made their choice. I made mine. And I sleep fine knowing I'll never have to hear their verdict again. If your parents went this far to break up your marriage, would you cut them off for good or try to rebuild? Do you think Daniel made the right call in never speaking to them again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and stick around for the next one.